Eli had never expected that buying an old house could change his life so completely. The listing had been brief, almost suspiciously so. Old house for sale, low price, no questions asked. Something about it had drawn him in. Perhaps it was the crooked roof, the peeling paint, or the way the surrounding trees seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. He didn't know why, but when he first saw the house in person, he felt a strange pull toward it, as if it were calling him home. The house sat at the edge of a small town, isolated and quiet. Its windows were dusty and cracked, and the wooden steps leading to the front door groaned under his weight. He carried his bags inside, the smell of old wood and dust filling his nose. The air felt heavy, almost alive, as if it remembered every person who had ever lived here. Eli shrugged off the unease. "It's just old," he told himself. "Old houses always smell like this." The inside was dim. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the curtains, casting long, narrow shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The furniture, mostly covered with white sheets, looked as though it had been waiting for decades for someone to return. Eli ran his hand along the banister, noticing the intricate carvings of flowers and vines, worn smooth with time. He spent the first day exploring the house. Upstairs, he found bedrooms with cracked walls and ceilings that had clearly suffered from water damage. Downstairs, the kitchen still had rusted utensils and an old, broken stove, but it was the basement that intrigued him most. He had a feeling that if there were any secrets in the house, they would be hidden there. The basement door was old and heavy. Eli had to pull with all his strength to open it. The air that rushed out smelled of damp earth and mold, colder than the rest of the house. He flicked on his flashlight and shone it across the basement. It was empty except for old crates, a rusted sink, and what looked like a wooden hatch in the center of the floor. The hatch was different from the rest of the floorboards. Its edges were cleaner, and it seemed to have been replaced more recently. Eli knelt down and ran his fingers along the edges. There was a small keyhole, but no key. His heart beat faster with a mixture of curiosity and fear. He wasn't sure why, but something told him he had to open it. He grabbed a crowbar from the corner of the basement and began to pry the hatch open. It resisted at first, groaning and creaking, but slowly it gave way. Beneath the hatch was a small, cramped space. The smell was worse here, sour and metallic. Eli shone his flashlight inside and froze. There in the darkness was a cage. It was small, just big enough for one person to sit, and inside it was a girl. She was not human. Her skin had a faint, pale glow and her eyes shimmered like polished opal. Her body was thin, covered in scars and bruises, and she trembled when she saw him. Eli stepped back, his mind racing. "Oh my God," he whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and fearful, but there was also a sharp intelligence behind them. Despite her injuries, she had not given up. Her hands pressed against the bars of the cage, small claws curling around the metal, but she did not make a sound. A small note was attached to the inside of the cage, yellowed with age. Eli picked it up carefully, reading the words written in a neat, alien script that he somehow could understand. "Do not free her. They are watching." Eli's stomach churned. Who had left her here and why? And who were they? He felt a mix of fear and determination. He could not just leave her there. She was alive, suffering, and alone. Whatever the warning meant, he knew he could not ignore her. He sat down on the cold basement floor, keeping his flashlight trained on her. "Hey," he said softly, trying not to scare her. "My name is Eli. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl flinched at his voice but did not move away. Slowly, she tilted her head, studying him. Her eyes glimmered as if she were trying to decide whether to trust him. He could see the fear in her gaze, but there was also curiosity. "I'm going to help you," Eli whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I will." She said nothing. She couldn't, or perhaps she didn't speak his language. He realized that understanding her would take patience. He had seen enough movies to know that patience could be more powerful than force. Eli spent the next few hours examining the cage. It was made of a strange metal he did not recognize, cold and smooth, with a locking mechanism that seemed impossible to break with human tools. But he didn't give up. He returned upstairs and rummaged through the basement for anything that could help him. Old tools, scraps of metal, even an old crowbar he had brought with him. It wasn't enough to break the cage, but it gave him ideas. He realized that if he wanted to free her, he needed a plan. Not just to open the cage, but to keep her safe afterward. The world outside was no friend to someone like her. Whoever had captured her would come looking, and they would be dangerous. As the sun began to set, Eli returned to the basement. The alien girl was still watching him, her glowing eyes following his every movement. He knelt down again. "I'm going to figure this out," he said. "I promise. You're not alone anymore." For the first time, she moved closer to the bars, pressing her forehead against them as if she could sense his sincerity. Eli's heart ached at the sight. She was so small, so fragile, yet there was a resilience in her that made him respect her. Whoever she was, whatever she had been through, she had survived, and he would make sure she survived now. As night fell, Eli lit a small lantern in the basement. The house was quiet, too quiet. He could feel it watching him, the walls heavy with memories of the past. Somewhere in the distance, a branch scraped against the window and he jumped, realizing how tense he had become. He thought about the note again. They are watching. Who were they? Aliens, humans, something else entirely. He did not know, but he sensed danger. Yet even with that fear, he felt a strange thrill. This was not just a house. It was a mystery, a challenge, and he had been chosen to face it. Hours passed. Eli and the alien girl sat in silence, separated by the bars but connected by unspoken understanding. He began to think of a name for her, something simple, something human enough to say without fear. "Kayla," he whispered. She tilted her head at the sound as if acknowledging it. It felt like a beginning. The first night in the house passed slowly. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind made Eli's heart race. But he could not sleep fully. He kept one eye on Kayla, on the cage, and on the basement door. He had made a promise to her, and promises were not to be broken. As he finally drifted into a light sleep, he dreamed of stars and distant planets. Kayla was there, reaching out her hand, and he knew that freeing her was only the first step. The real challenge was coming, and it would test everything about him, his courage, his ingenuity, and his humanity. When dawn broke, Eli woke with a renewed determination. He had seen what the house had hidden, and he could not ignore it. Kayla's future, and perhaps even the fate of others like her, was now in his hands. And he would not fail. The next morning, Eli woke before sunrise. He could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside and the faint creak of the old house settling. But his mind was already focused on Kayla. He didn't know where to start, but he knew the first step was to build trust. If she was scared, angry, or defensive, no plan would work. He went downstairs quietly, trying not to startle her. The lantern was still flickering softly, casting shadows across the basement. Kayla was sitting on the floor of her cage, her glowing eyes watching him. She did not move when he entered, but Eli sensed she was alert, calculating. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought you something to eat." He held out a small package of food he had scavenged from the kitchen, bread, some dried fruit, and water in a small cup. He wasn't sure if she could eat human food, but it was worth trying. Kayla hesitated. She sniffed the food, her eyes narrowing. Then slowly she reached out with one hand. Her fingers were delicate, almost translucent, and they shook as she took a piece of bread. She didn't speak, but her movements were careful, deliberate. Eli watched, relieved. "You're safe here," he said. "I won't hurt you, I promise." For a long while she just ate quietly, still watching him from behind the bars. Eli sat nearby, talking softly, telling her about himself. He spoke of simple things, the town he lived in, his work, how he liked the quiet. He didn't know if she understood him, but the tone mattered more than the words. His voice was calm, patient, human. Days passed and the routine became familiar. Eli would bring food, water, and blankets. He would talk to her, sometimes for hours, while she remained silent. Then gradually she began to respond, not with words but with gestures. A nod, a tilt of her head, even a small hand movement when she wanted something. It was slow, frustratingly slow, but it was progress. Eli noticed other things too. She had strange abilities. When he brought his old tablet to show her pictures, the screen would flicker strangely, then adjust itself, almost as if she was controlling it. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, the sharpness of her mind. Kayla was no ordinary being, and the more he learned, the more he realized how lucky he was to have found her. One evening, as the sun set and the basement was bathed in golden light, Kayla finally made her first clear gesture of communication. She drew in the dust on the floor with her finger, simple symbols that Eli did not understand. He leaned closer, fascinated. She pointed at the symbols, then at herself, and finally at him. It was a simple idea, me, you together. Eli smiled, feeling a surge of hope. Yes, he said, we are together. I will help you. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Eli became more determined to free her, but he also knew that doing so would be dangerous. Whoever had left her in the cage was still out there. They were watching, just as the note had said. He needed a plan, and he needed it to be smart. He began studying the cage, examining the strange metal and the locking mechanism. Days of careful observation taught him that it was not just a simple lock. It was a sophisticated device, possibly alien in design. Eli realized he would need more than brute force. He needed to understand it, to think like Kayla's captors had when they built it. Kayla seemed to sense his determination. She watched him closely, sometimes touching the metal bars, as if she could feel the hidden mechanisms inside. Eli suspected that she might be able to help him somehow. She had intelligence, intuition, and perhaps knowledge of the technology that built the cage. But he had to gain her trust completely before she would cooperate. Then came the night when everything changed. Eli had left the basement door slightly open while he went upstairs to grab some tools. When he returned, Kayla was looking at the shadows in the corner, her body tense. He followed her gaze and saw it, a small drone hovering near the basement window, its single red eye glowing. Eli's heart pounded. Whoever was watching had sent a scout. They were close. He knew they would not hesitate to take Kayla back, and this time they might not leave any evidence behind. He whispered to her, "Stay calm, don't move, I've got this." Kayla pressed herself against the back of the cage, trembling but obedient. Eli grabbed the crowbar and banged it against the basement floor, creating a loud noise. The drone shivered, its sensors confused by the unexpected vibration. Then he grabbed his tablet and activated a small makeshift jammer he had cobbled together. The drone flickered, then lost power, crashing to the floor with a small thud. Kayla watched, her eyes wide. For the first time, she seemed to understand the danger, and also the protection Eli could provide. She reached out, pressing a small hand against the bars in a gesture that seemed to say, "Thank you." That night, Eli stayed in the basement with her. He patched the small wound from a scrape she had gotten during the earlier struggle and talked to her about the world outside the cage. "There's a lot out there," he said. "People like me, people who will help, people who care. You won't be alone anymore." Kayla leaned closer, her head resting on the bars. Eli felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had found her, yes, but now he had to protect her. Not just from the slavers who had captured her, but from the entire world that might not understand her. Over the next week, Eli prepared for a more permanent solution. He cleaned the basement, creating a small, hidden space behind the cage where Kayla could rest safely without being exposed. He reinforced the windows and doors, set up simple alarms with motion sensors, and tested the makeshift security system he had designed. Every day he talked to her, showing her the technology he was building and teaching her to trust him. Kayla, in turn, began to teach him. She would touch the devices, and they would respond to her presence, lighting up or changing patterns. Eli realized that her species had a natural connection with technology, almost as if they could communicate with machines through thought. This fascinated him and gave him an idea. "Maybe we can use this," he said one evening. "If you can control machines, maybe you can help me figure out a way to open your cage. Together." Kayla tilted her head and pressed her hand against the bars, then against the small keypad on the cage. It flickered, and for a moment the lock made a soft click. Eli's heart raced. It was working. They could do it together, but their progress did not go unnoticed. Late one night, Eli saw a shadow pass by the basement window. Someone or something was watching again. They were patient, careful, and they knew he was working on freeing her. Eli's stomach turned with worry, but he refused to panic. He had to be smarter, faster, and more careful than anyone expecting to take her. Eli and Kayla continued their work in secret. Using her abilities and his ingenuity, they tested different ways to unlock the cage without triggering alarms or damaging the mechanism. It was slow, meticulous work, and it required absolute trust between them. During one late-night session, Kayla finally managed to manipulate the small alien circuits embedded in the cage. The lock clicked, but the door remained closed. She looked at Eli, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, as if to say, "Almost there." Eli smiled, feeling hope surge through him. "We're going to get you out of here," he whispered. "I promise." As the night deepened, they worked in silence, communicating through gestures and shared focus. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and the old house creaked as if it were alive. Eli realized that freeing Kayla would not just be a physical challenge. It would be a test of patience, courage, and trust. But he was ready. By dawn, a plan had formed. They would need to act quickly and carefully, using every bit of human cleverness and alien ability at their disposal. The cage's final lock would require both of them, and when it opened, there would be no turning back. Kayla pressed her head against the bars one last time, and Eli could feel her fear, hope, and determination. "Soon," he said softly, "very soon you'll be free." And for the first time she seemed to smile, a small, fleeting expression that made all the danger, fear, and effort worthwhile. The world outside might be dangerous, the enemies patient and ruthless, but together, Eli and Kayla had a chance. And in that moment, the bond between human and alien was stronger than any cage, any fear, or any threat. The adventure was only beginning. The first rays of dawn slipped through the dusty basement windows. Eli had not slept all night, planning every move, every possibility. Kayla sat quietly in her cage, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows. She was calm but alert, as if she knew that today everything would change. Eli knelt beside the cage, placing his hand gently on hers. "We're ready," he whispered. "We just have to do this carefully." Step by step, Kayla pressed her forehead against his hand, and he could feel her trust radiating toward him. That trust gave him courage. He checked the basement door, ensuring it was locked from the inside, and then examined the cage one last time. Kayla's fingers brushed the strange alien circuits embedded in the metal. They pulsed faintly as if responding to her will. Eli realized that freeing her would require her direct participation. He could not do it alone. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded slightly, her eyes glowing brighter in affirmation. Eli took a deep breath, then began the procedure they had practiced. He pressed small switches, adjusted wires, and carefully manipulated the lock while Kayla focused on the circuits. Slowly the mechanisms whirred and clicked, the metal groaning under pressure. The final lock held tight. Eli's heart pounded. He looked at Kayla. She nodded, and together they pushed, twisted, and activated the lock one last time. There was a soft, almost musical click. The cage door swung open. Kayla hesitated for a moment, then stepped out. She was small and fragile looking, but there was strength in her movements. She looked at Eli with a mixture of gratitude and determination. He smiled, relieved, but knew the danger was far from over. Whoever had captured her would not remain idle. They moved quietly through the basement, avoiding the windows and doors that could expose them. Eli had prepared a small exit route, using old storage passages that led to the woods behind the house. Kayla followed, her senses sharp, guiding him past the faint glow of hidden security devices he had noticed before. As they reached the last doorway, Eli froze. A shadow passed outside. Someone or something was watching. His stomach tightened. They were close, much closer than he had imagined. He motioned for Kayla to stay behind him. The figure stepped into view, a tall, humanoid being, dressed in a dark suit that reflected the early morning light. Its face was obscured, but its eyes glowed faintly, alien in shape and color. Eli's mind raced. This had to be one of the slavers. There was no time for hesitation. He whispered to Kayla, "We go now. Stay close and follow exactly." She nodded, moving silently beside him. They slipped through the door into the dense trees beyond the house. The slaver raised a weapon, but Kayla's reflexes were faster. She touched a nearby piece of metal debris, and it vibrated sharply, sending a pulse that disrupted the slaver's device. The weapon misfired harmlessly into the ground. Eli took the opportunity to run, pulling Kayla with him. Branches whipped past, but they moved with urgency and precision. The slaver chased them for a few steps, but quickly realized that Kayla's abilities and Eli's cunning made them difficult targets. Frustrated, it retreated, disappearing back into the shadows near the house. They reached a small clearing in the forest where Eli had hidden a vehicle. It was old, dusty, but functional. He had filled it with fuel and supplies, preparing for this exact moment. Kayla stepped inside, her glowing eyes scanning the surroundings as if reading the environment for threats. Eli started the engine and the car rattled to life. Driving away, they both exhaled, realizing they had gained a temporary reprieve. But the journey was not over. They needed a safe place, somewhere hidden from the slavers who had taken Kayla and others like her. Eli had thought about this for days. There was an abandoned spaceport a few hours away, a place isolated with old hangars and storage facilities. It would serve as a temporary refuge and a place to plan their next move. During the drive, Kayla began to communicate more clearly. She gestured at the dashboard, activating small devices with a touch. The lights flickered, the engine hummed more smoothly, and the car seemed almost alive under her influence. Eli realized that her abilities extended to machinery far beyond what he had seen. He felt a thrill of hope. Together they could do more than survive. They could fight back. When they arrived at the spaceport, it was quiet, empty, and abandoned, just as Eli had hoped. The hangars were large, with metal floors and walls that could hide them from prying eyes. Kayla explored cautiously, sensing the echoes of past activity, the residual energy of long-dead machines. She nodded to Eli, signaling that it was safe to settle in. Eli worked quickly to secure the area. He set up simple barricades, improvised alarms, and prepared for the possibility of an attack. Kayla assisted, moving effortlessly among the old machinery, touching consoles and devices that sprang to life under her influence. It was astonishing to watch. Eli realized that together, they could turn even a forgotten, abandoned place into a fortress. As night fell, Eli and Kayla sat in one of the hangars, sharing a quiet moment. He looked at her, noticing how much she had changed in just a few days. She was still small and scarred, but her posture was stronger, her eyes brighter. Trust had grown between them, and they had survived the first real threat together. "We've made it this far," Eli said, "but the fight isn't over. We need to make sure they never find you or anyone else like you again." Kayla pressed her hand against his, acknowledging his words. It was a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. The following days were a blur of preparation. Eli and Kayla explored the spaceport, learning how to reactivate old systems and machines. They discovered small supplies left behind, repairing what they could and improving their defenses. Kayla's abilities allowed them to interface with old technology, giving them an advantage that no human slaver could anticipate. One afternoon, while scouting the perimeter, they found evidence of other captives, small signs that suggested Kayla had not been the only one. Eli's heart tightened. If they could free more beings like her, it could change everything. He shared the idea with Kayla and she agreed. Her eyes shone with determination. They would not only survive, they would fight back. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A scouting party of slavers arrived, moving through the forest with caution. Eli and Kayla were ready. Using a combination of traps, technological disruption, and careful strategy, they created a series of obstacles that slowed the slavers' advance. Kayla manipulated the environment, sending signals that caused alarms and confusion, while Eli used his knowledge of human ingenuity to predict their movements. The confrontation was tense. The slavers were relentless, but the combination of human cleverness and alien abilities proved too much. One by one, the slavers were incapacitated, retreating in frustration and fear. Eli and Kayla had turned the tables. For the first time, they realized that they were not just survivors, they were victors. After the skirmish, Eli and Kayla explored the area near the forest and discovered several hidden cages, similar to the one she had been kept in. Using their combined abilities, they freed the captives, small beings of various alien species, weak and frightened but alive. Kayla communicated with them, guiding them, offering reassurance. Eli watched, proud of what they had accomplished together. With the new allies, they returned to the spaceport, reinforcing it further. Each freed being added a new layer of protection, a new perspective, and a growing sense of hope. Eli realized that humanity's potential lay not just in strength or intelligence, but in courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Kayla's trust in him had unlocked that potential, and together they had built a safe haven. Months passed. The spaceport became a hidden sanctuary, a place where humans and aliens worked together, learning from each other, preparing for a future that was uncertain but full of possibilities. Eli and Kayla often sat together, watching the stars through the broken roof panels. They spoke in gestures, simple words, and shared thoughts. Each night, the glow from Kayla's body illuminated the hangar, a symbol of resilience, hope, and the bond between two very different beings. One evening, as they watched the horizon, Eli said softly, "We've done something incredible. You're safe, and so are all of them. But the world out there, it's big and it's dangerous. We can't let fear stop us." Kayla rested her head on his shoulder. She had survived the cage, the slavers, and the unknown. Now, with Eli by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. And in that moment, Eli understood something profound. Humanity was more than cleverness or strength. It was empathy, bravery, and the will to fight for what was right. Kayla had seen that in him, and he had seen it in her. Together, they had turned a terrifying beginning into a future full of hope. The stars above twinkled in silence, vast and eternal. Eli and Kayla stood ready to face whatever the universe had in store. And whatever it was, they would face it together.